bring our console. Just give me 1 second. Okay. I believe with you can confirm if you can see my screen, but I believe you guys can see it because I'm using it on top of the presentation. Let me just expand the horizons a little bit here. So if we look at um, where to find all the findings related to Kubernetes security posture management, unlike CSPM Plus that has its own dedicated console, it would be part of the findings section for risk management. Why? Because we consider that Kubernetes, as we mentioned at the beginning, is another asset, or your Kubernetes cluster is another asset to your organization. So that's why we use it as a data source for any related risks, and we tap into risk management so you can see any findings, any resources that are on Kubernetes in this section. Now, when it comes to findings, I wanted to show you that not only you can create a smart view, like you can see on the screen here with Kubernetes, but you can also search by, for example, finding type. And here, if I want to, I can just focus on the ones related to control plane, right? Control plane being one of the main, let's say, moving pieces of Kubernetes, because that's the top level of that console or that environment. And then from there, of course, if I want to look at specific findings, for example, we've mentioned etcd, which is the brain of the operation for containers. I can look at it here. And if I wanted to, for example, quickly check one, tell me about etcd client authentication, right? Now, if I click on it and I hit apply, it would tell me whether or not I have any misconfiguration there. You can see that the risk score is 0. That means good news for whoever is managing this environment, because we don't have any issues or any misconfigurations at all. We can also see that the finding type is control plane, because that's what I'm using here to filter. And you can see also as part of our KSPM product, that compliance standard that we're using as a reference to assess whether or not this is compliant is CIS for Kubernetes. So that benchmark version 1.1 is what we're using for in this case. Now, if I want to just ignore that and I want to focus on other issues that definitely need my attention, I can go back to that same uh, smart view that I saved, and now I can see some other components here that are not necessarily compliant. For instance, I can look at something as simple as SE Linux options configurations. This particular one, you can see here that it verifies whether the container, whether the workload and the container define any SE Linux option. This is basically native security controls or security rules that you can establish using SE Linux, and in this case is not in use. That's why we're flagging it here, and we're flagging it as a high severity type of misconfiguration. Of course, you can, if this is not an issue, because perhaps you can deem that there's not such a risk because, for example, the asset is not exposed, so you haven't identified any threat actor or potential attacker, then you can say ignore. It's very unlikely that you won't be able to associate it with any threat, but if that's the case, you can always click to ignore the risk. Once, of course, the risk is fixed, you can proceed to rescan again. You can run another scan, and you should be able to see that is whether it's fixed or not. It should clear out and perhaps give you that 0% in the risk score that I show you with etcd. Right. Let's take a look at another one. For example, privilege escalation. Right. This one is related to workload configuration. That's the finding type. And you can see here that basically the explanation of it verifies whether or not a pod or deployments are defined as privilege. And this is something that should be mitigated. Now, something that I wanted to show you here as how we can pivot from here to, let's say, tie the story to or the finding to the resources in which we found it. So we can click here and we can say view resources, and then we can see that this is part of this Calico node. So I can click on it, I can see not only this issue, but also multiple other misconfigurations that require attention. For example, resource CPU limit, non-root containers, immutable container file system. So we have multiple issues here that can be addressed on this particular on this particular resource, right? And if you want to see the score, if you want to see explanation and also the details of that particular risk, you can see it here. Good news is that, as I said before, we can pivot back and forth from the resource to the asset, to the risk or the misconfiguration, or vice versa. You can go from here, which is the finding, to back into the resources. Also, you might be wondering, like, how can I do this? How can I use the Kubernetes security posture management? From where in Gravity Zone do I get it? So the answer is pretty simple: installation packages. And then from installation packages, you should have probably at the end of all the pages, in the same realm that we have security server and the NSPA or network sensor virtual appliance, we have Kubernetes cluster agent. So if I click on it, assuming that I already have the license, otherwise this wouldn't be possible without the CSPM Plus license, you can click on download and you would see there Kubernetes Helm chart. We go quickly here through requirements. Basically, you need to ensure that you have a name for your cluster or a name in place. Then ensure that you have an account with installation permissions. That means you're an admin, otherwise you won't be able to deploy. And second, some other permissions like deployment, cron jobs, config maps, and secrets. And from there, you need to install two moving pieces that are essential. I would say kubectl that comes by default with Kubernetes, so probably you don't need to worry about that. And I would say the vast majority of DevOps teams, they use Helm because it's easier for deployment. So if you don't have it, of course you can deploy it. We have some instructions there as to how to deploy it. If you click on these blue links, you can get the link to where to get it from. And then from there, it's just a matter of downloading the provide Helm chart package, which is this. All you have to do is just copy this and paste it in your shell. And then from there, you need to add the Helm chart to your cluster, which is another copy paste. Basically, you copy the script, go back to your shell, paste it, and once you do that, our scanner should be set. Then from there, moving forward, all the scans would happen from the risk management section, findings, and you can do the scan from here. Okay, this can be run anytime that you want. It would look at endpoint risk. It would look at cloud resources scan. That means anything that you have in CSPM. It would tap into here as a data source, and network scan for any NSPA that we have, since that's a capability of the network sensor. Once you do that, you should be able to see what the new scan brings in. And for example, if you added or instantiated a new worker node as part of your cluster or clusters, you need to run the scan to be able to see this information here. And then from there, of course, with the resources that belong to Kubernetes, you should be able to see what findings we have uncovered. You can see the category. For example, you can always look at finding type and select what is needed there. Most of times, or most of what you would see is workload configuration, because this is referring again to the nest, to the worker nodes that you have as part of that cluster. But for example, you can see some others like access control, network, secrets, basically all the components and moving pieces that you have in your Kubernetes cluster. Now, also, as a form of refresh, I wanted to mention what we're deploying here for the scanner is essentially that. It's just a scanner to be able to integrate with your Kubernetes environment and be able to introspect that environment from the management plane down and do something similarly to what we do with CSPM in any cloud service provider. Just assess from the management plane down to the infrastructure what issues or findings we have there. But that piece of protection, I know that I showed it last week, but if you wanted to just take a peek of that and you want to see it from the network section, and this is more referring to the runtime, like the inside protection of the workload. You can see, for example, these AKS nodes that I have for Azure Kubernetes Service nodes that I have in Azure. And you can see their status, you can see whether or not they're managed, which policies they have, etc. And this is also true for the containers that live within those, let's say, clusters. So if you want to see more information about that, you can always see it here. If I want to see the specific ones that I was talking about with AKS, I can simply click on it and it will show me any container that I have across my pods, including our daemon set, which can be seen here. The only nuance when it comes to the protection for containers within that, let's say, worker node is that if you need to update, you will need to instruct Kubernetes to do it again, and that will bring the latest and greatest version that we have from our side for the daemon set, right? To be able to protect your cluster or your node using the latest version of our product. Basically, you can see it here. Okay, so this is not something that we do as part of the, or similar to what we do with the agent, that you can just right click on it and update or run a task to update. You would have to instantiate again or deploy again the daemon set. Well, in this case, you have to remove it. And then once you remove the daemon set, you can just install it again. It's a pretty easy process. It would take probably less than 5 seconds from the moment that you remove it, and then to set it back up to the latest version, it would take you probably less than 10 seconds, I would dare to say. It depends on how fast you can connect to the internet. In this case, we access to that image in Docker Hub, but it should be fairly easy. Okay, so now that we show you what we have in the console, allow me to go back. And essentially, this is another product that is on early access. We are going to bring it soon to GA, but essentially is there for you to have, when we're talking about visibility and being able to see, being able to protect what you can see. This is an example, I would say a very pragmatic example. So this works for cloud environments, whether it's Azure or AWS. And if you click on any of these issues, it tells you, similarly to what we do with an incident in the root cause analysis section or the graphical representation section, it tells you how can an attack happen, or how can your infrastructure be breached based on misconfigurations, based on exposures that we have identified using components or security controls, like for example, CSPM+. This is insightful because this would help you in terms of prevention efforts to mitigate, to fix and correct any misconfiguration or any issues, to make sure that your environment stays safe and is never breached. So this is something that you can see that it's in this case based on EC2. We're talking about AWS, but essentially it's describing a potential path via the use of security groups, misconfigurations, and then network interfaces, etc. Is just highlighting how an attack could happen because of these misconfigurations. And of course, if you want to see metadata because you want to have more insights as to what is misconfigured. You can see it here. And the same is true for the resource. So if you want to view the resource, it would pivot back to the risk management. And there is where you have that misconfigure security group. It's a low priority vulnerability, but this is similar to, or oftentimes I describe it similar to a pen test, right? So if you do a vulnerability assessment yourself, probably you can uncover multiple vulnerabilities. The question is, what do I do with that, right? More likely, you're gonna filter by the top priority or high severity and critical severity vulnerabilities and focus on that because that's what matters the most. However, if you do a pen test with an expert, that expert would also provide you insights as to how he or she was able to correlate even the small impact or a small or lowest severity findings and vulnerabilities to identify a potential attack path. This is exactly or similar to what the breach path is doing for you in cloud. So it's looking at any potential vulnerabilities. You saw it on that example. It's a very low severity vulnerability, but if you aggregate all of these low severity vulnerabilities, you're basically increasing the attack path and you're increasing the attack surface in terms of exposure. So that means that with multiple low severity misconfigurations and vulnerabilities, a breach and an attack path can become true. Again, just wanted to show it to you as part of the insights for what's coming. Feel free to use it. It's on early access. And of course, if you have any questions, we're more than happy to help you with setting it up and answering any questions.